Hi, everybody. This is a slideshow about incorporating research into your paper. So, the prior slideshow I gave regarding research was how to actually find research in the TCC library. This slideshow is all about how to cite the research properly and incorporate it as you begin writing the draft of your paper or continue writing the draft of your paper. Okay, as you begin to put the research you find into your paper, you're going to need to balance four things. The first two will be familiar to you. Number one is direct quotes and paraphrased ideas from your chosen short story, and that is evidence. And then number two is analysis, explanation of that evidence. So you did both of those in paper number one. You found direct quotes, you found ideas from the story, and you analyzed them. What we're doing now is we're adding number three and four. Number three is direct quotes and paraphrased ideas from the research you find, which is also evidence. It's just another kind of evidence. It's evidence that you found from research to support your thesis, not just from the story. This is what research is for. It's to help support and complement and supplement your thesis, to basically let your audience know that there are others who have the same ideas as you, that you're having a conversation with other people about this story. This is the thrust of academic research. And then number four is analysis and explanation of the evidence found by doing research, which is the same as number two, except instead of analyzing just the short story, you're now analyzing the evidence as well. There is an acronym called ICE, which, if you remember ICE, ICE, you should be able to think about how it refers to the integration of quotes into your material. So ICE, as you can see, stands for Introduce, Cite, Explain. Never introduce a quote or paraphrase abruptly into your writing without first briefly introducing it, citing it, and then explaining it. So it's often referred to as ICE. Again, I for introduce, C for cite, and E for explain. So let's start with introduce. When introducing your quote, you will provide the context of the quote as well as who said it. You will use what is called a signal phrase to introduce the quote. Let me circle the word signal phrase because that's important. The signal phrase will have a signal verb that indicates a particular writer's words are coming up next in your paper. And I've just given you a chart here of signal verbs that are often used when you're talking about and introducing research. Things like argues, suggests, thinks, presents, claims, etc. So you can come back to this chart anytime you want and find verbs that you can use when you're incorporating your research and when you're creating a signal phrase to introduce your research. And then this is a continuation of the introduce slide or idea. The following phrases are signal phrases. So I gave you the verbs first, and now here are the phrases that you could use to introduce. There are many more. These are common ones, and you can always come back again and look at these and use these in your paper. You could also call them templates for introducing quotes, where X is the name of the author who wrote the quote. So, as X observes, and then you have the quote from the research. According to literary critic X, X, a professor of English, maintains. In her book, one writer asserts that. And you see that continues on this way. If we go back to the prior slide and think about the verbs that are used here, verbs like observes, maintains, asserts, argues, those are all on that chart, and there are many others as well. So this is the introduction part of the ICE. So now we have cite. directly after your signal phrase at the end of the sentence. Okay? So you have a sentence, you have a quote. Before you go to step 4 from the very beginning of this slide, which is analyzing the quote or analyzing the evidence, you will use parentheses to enclose the author's last name only and page number. And here are a few rules about that. If you have included the author's name in the signal phrase, you do not need the author's name a second time. So you don't need it in the parentheses. If you cannot find any page numbers in your article, which is common when you're researching online articles, you don't need to put a fake page number there. You can just leave it blank. And so, ultimately, if you have put the author's name in the signal phrase and have no page number, there will be no need for parentheses after the sentence. So let me show you a few examples and talk about them a little bit. So this first example, X states in her article, and then there's the quote, and X is the name of the author. So X here is in the sentence. X is in the sentence, and therefore all we need is page number. We don't need X's name again in the parentheses. So you can see that happens in most of these examples. Again, these are just a few examples. Now let's go down to the fifth one. In her book, one writer asserts that. And notice that in choosing to write this way, in choosing to start the sentence saying one writer asserts, you have the author's last name in the parentheses here because it is not in the sentence. So I'll write that again. X in parentheses because it's not in the sentence. Signal phrase. So, once again, if the signal phrase has the author's name, you don't need to write it again in the parentheses. If the signal phrase you've chosen to write does not have the author's name, then you do have to put it in parentheses. That is the proper citation. Not only quotation marks if you've quoted it directly. Of course, quotation marks you have to quote word for word. And I have another slideshow coming up on that. But then you have the page number if you can find the page number. Okay, moving. Okay, and now we have explain. So the E part of the ICE acronym. After the quote, you must explain the significance of the quote. How might it relate to your thesis and topic sentence of your paragraph? What interpretation of the quote or material do you have? Does the quote support your argument and why? As the writer, it is your responsibility to interpret the quote for your readers and provide the significance. Let me add one more thing here. If you have paraphrased information from your research, that is, if you have put it in your own words, then you also cite it and you also explain it. So it's the exact same whether or not you have a paraphrase or a direct quote. So we've gone through here the 4 steps that were detailed in the very first slide. Primary source or short story, quote or paraphrase, then explanation, research, quote or paraphrase, and then explanation. And finally, for the final slideshow here, we have a sample paragraph with research that is following the ICE format, the ICE format. And so I'm going to go through this and try to maybe color code it and let you know what's going on with each of these sentences as we move forward. This is actually a paragraph from the book Text to Text, Writing About Literature. Some of you have used that book this semester. Anyway, It is about a poem called Because I Could Not Stop for Death. So let me just start here. Dickinson's narrator does not fear death, perhaps because death is associated here not so much with endings or divine judgment, but instead with a very human journey. So this is the topic sentence. This is what the paragraph will be about. And we're assuming that this topic sentence links back to the thesis. The driver seems affable, kindly stopping and driving slowly. In stanza 2, the narrator puts her work away to observe the driver calmly. So these are both pieces of evidence from the text. Evidence from primary source. And remember, your primary source is your short story. This is a poem, but it works the exact same way. Next, it may seem unlikely that she would be trusting of so ominous a character. But as critic Betsy Erkilla explains, quote, Death himself comes courting as an aristocratic gentleman with horses and a carriage. We have two things going on here. We have analysis of evidence from poem in the first part of the sentence, okay? And then we have evidence from research. In the second part of the sentence, Betsy Erkilla. There is the direct quote. There is the page number right here, okay? David Barker carries this one step further, noting, quote, how homely and comfortable is this ride, and comparing it to a, quote, mild 19th century date. This is also evidence from research. What this student has done is advanced. I don't expect you necessarily to do it, but this student has found two quotes from two different pieces of research, two different authors that support the idea of the topic sentence and that add on to her own notion that she has put in this particular paragraph. Betsy Erkilla has the page number. There's no page number for David Barker because we couldn't find a page number, remember, from earlier in the slideshow. And so now we have this. Indeed, the fact that the carriage driver has stopped for the narrator on a day when she was too busy to do the same emphasizes his courtesy and thoughtfulness as a character. This is an original and deeply humanistic perception of death, in which the personified entity is neither a black-coated grim reaper nor a stern servant of God. So these right here are E, explanation of research. Evidence from research. So this orange explanation is the same as the green explanation, except one is analyzing the poem and one is analyzing the research. And the evidence from the primary source in red is the same as the evidence from the research in blue, except one is finding evidence from the poem and one is finding evidence from research. So this is how you use ICE. This is a good example, I think, this particular paragraph of how a paragraph will look with research incorporated in it. And remember, research does need to be incorporated throughout your paper rather than just stuffed in one paragraph somewhere. And then you just continue on with your own analysis and no research. The idea of research is to connect it and integrate it throughout a paper. Okay, if you have any other questions, let me know, and have a good week and a good day. Bye-bye.